Welcome everyone to Energy Benchmarking Tips and Tricks. Thank you for joining the webinar today. This is a great webinar that's going to get you started on all the things you need to know about starting an Energy Star Portfolio Manager account, learn about how to get your building benchmarked, why you should do it, some of the common mishaps that might happen along the way to get you on the right track and on the right foot to start. I am here with the Illinois Green Alliance, Katie Kaluzny, as part of the Building Energy Resource Hub project, and I'm joined by Devin Snyder. I'm going to introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Devin. I'm a project manager with the public sector team at Elevate. As Katie said, I support the hub, specifically as it relates to benchmarking programs, and I've also assisted the city of Chicago in managing their benchmarking program as well. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Devin. Devin and I love talking about energy benchmarking, so we are excited to chat with you about all of the resources today. But as she mentioned, we both work on a project called the Building Energy Resource Hub. We have been working on this project for about a year or so. It's a joint effort between Illinois Green Alliance, Elevate, along with partners at the Illinois Climate Bank, the International Code Council, ComEd, City of Chicago, and a lot of other great partners. So we've put together kind of a one-stop shop of resources for the building industry on energy and efficiency and decarbonization best practices. And so today's webinar, we're going to dive into kind of one of those getting started pieces, which is understanding the energy use at your building. So in our 101 today, we are going to show you how to set up an Energy Star Portfolio Manager account, what that is, how to create your own personal account, how to create your building profile, how to gather and enter utility data, how to share the data, how to access building energy use or assess building energy use, and then how to fix common errors. We are going to be providing a PDF of this webinar afterwards. So any of the links that we talk about, any of the resources we share, you'll be able to click and learn a little bit more about those afterwards as you're going through your process. We'll also share a recording of today's webinar if you want to revisit any of the points that we talk about today. We'll also be sharing a few different links and tips in the chat as we go along. So check the chat for those links if there's something that interests you that we are discussing. And then also make sure to put your questions that you have for Devin and I in the chat or in the Q&A as well. And we'll save time at the end to go over those questions when we get to them. And thanks again for joining. We're going to start out by talking about what is Energy Star. Some of you are probably familiar with the Energy Star logo. It was created by the EPA in 1992, provides resources and tools for businesses and households to improve energy use. There are a number of utilities, states and local governments and nonprofits that use Energy Star in their efficiency programs. It's a common brand that people recognize, and it's a really great way to know that you're saving energy with that brand. But one of the other things they offer is a tool, an online free tool called Portfolio Manager. It helps buildings manage energy, water, waste consumption and track those changes over time. We like to say you can't manage what you don't measure. And so this is a way to measure what you're doing over time throughout the year and year over year and see if different improvements or things that are happening at your building or property are making improvements or actually taking you in the other direction. And so you can be tracking that and assess it. Energy Star also has a 1 to 100 score that you can achieve. A 50 is average in their score system, and then a 75 or higher makes you eligible for an Energy Star certification for your building. So that's one thing that they offer as well, is just kind of some recognition for high-performing buildings in their tool. So that's a little bit about Portfolio Manager. And I mentioned this already before, but you can't manage what you don't measure. And so benefits of tracking data, it allows you to identify underperforming buildings, any targets for energy efficiency improvements. It helps you to set some investment priorities. It also helps you to verify the savings by showing you over time if the savings and the investments you've made have led to improvements in energy use. You can also share and report your performance to stakeholders. I mentioned you can earn recognition, and then it just creates a really opportunity to develop a comprehensive management program to keep improving over time, or at least staying at a steady state. So that's one of the benefits. And so we love helping buildings figure this out and get started. There are some municipalities throughout Illinois that do require energy benchmarking for certain building types and sizes. And we're not going to be getting into the specifics of those ordinances today, but if you have questions about meeting a specific ordinance requirement, you can ask those in the chat. We'll address them at the end and also share resources for each municipality specifically. But again, any building can benchmark. It doesn't have to do it just because you're required to. So that's why we're sharing this information today. So we are going to get started. I'm going to take you first to the very first screen that you would use to set up a portfolio manager account. You go to portfoliomanager.energystar.gov, and when you get to this page, there's an opportunity to create an account or log into an existing account. So this is an example of what the page looks like when you go there. And on the side, there's this opportunity to register now for a new account or log in with a username and password. So that's where you'll get started. Once you're getting started, this is really your personal account. So this is an account for you or for like me as an individual if I was signing up for my access to Portfolio Manager. How you set up your building, we'll talk about in a minute. It's a little bit different. And actually the building you can share between multiple Portfolio Manager accounts. So other people at your building or at your organization might be able to share and work on this together. But this is to make sure you have your own username and password to log into Portfolio Manager. So it's just more personal information to you, like you're setting up a LinkedIn account or something. Once you've set up your account, Portfolio Manager is going to send you an email. You have to verify your email address so that you're able to log in. And once you get to your account, you're going to end up with this as your main screen. You end up on the My Portfolio tab, which is where you'll do most of your work. But there's also some other tabs, like we mentioned before, there's sharing. So that's a tab where you can share your building between other users in Portfolio Manager. And that reporting and recognition, which is how you can kind of track your building over time and see how you're performing as well. We're going to talk mostly about the My Portfolio tab. And where you'll start first is adding a property. So you'll click right in that blue button in the top, add a property. And Devin and I will mention this multiple times throughout, but any link that is blue that you'll see there, you can hover over it for a definition or click it and it'll open a whole glossary page for Portfolio Manager. It's very helpful in that way. So once you click the add a property, it's first going to ask you what the primary use type of your property is. Portfolio Manager has over 80 different primary use types that you can select from. And so this is when those glossary definitions come in really handy. You want to make sure that you're setting up your building with the right type. What is the majority, more than 50% of the property's purpose? Is it a movie theater? Is it a church? Is it a office building? Is it a multifamily building? And then it even gets really down into the weeds of like, is it a senior care community? Because they're trying to figure out, which different types of questions to ask you as it continues through the process. A senior care facility might have medical equipment that uses energy. And so it's going to ask you some different questions than maybe a multifamily or an office building setting. So the first thing you do is pick your primary use type. You'll be able to add secondary use types at a later time. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, but pick that primary. And then most people are going to be selecting a single building, like your building is just standalone and you're benchmarking this building by itself. And so that's one of the selections. But I'm going to turn it to Devin really quick because there are some reasons why you might pick that you are part of a more than one building or a campus setting.
That first circled area at the bottom where it says more than one, it'll usually be like a campus property. And if you click on that campus guidelines, it'll send you to some steps in how to register those different properties, how to link them together, how to report them together. I'm also dropping the link in the chat to assist with some of those campus properties as well. In certain cases, your municipality's ordinance might have a size or use type threshold that if a property is under that or it's not that use type, you think it doesn't require to be reported, but if it has a shared energy system with a property that's over that type, over that size or that type, it's helpful to have them together. So think critically about if there's multiple properties on the campus that share the same energy meter, things like that. There's great resources on how to mark those together to save you time in the future as well.
That's great. I have not benchmarked campus properties, so I appreciate that guidance. And that's why there's these great links in the chat to kind of figure out those pieces of the puzzle, because that comes up depending on the, the type of system or the type of property that you own. And then the next one, everyone is going, if you're benchmarking an existing building that has over 12 months of data, so it's been in existence, it has utility bills for the past 12 months, you click existing. There's also this test property, which you can pick if you want to just play around in Portfolio Manager and try some different pieces of the tool out. So just wanted to point out that there's another way that you're just kind of testing out the features for the purposes of training. So that's one way to look at it as well. Once you select those pieces, you're going to click Get Started. And then it's going to start asking you some questions about your property. All of the fields that have the red asterisk are required fields, so you're not going to be able to go to the next page or go to the next piece until you know this information. So Portfolio Manager does have kind of worksheets that you can use to fill out information and kind of collect it from different people within the building to make sure you have all this information when you sit down and start doing this. Or you can check out what these questions are and always come back. You can always change them as well, but it's not going to let you go to the next page without putting these in. So you need to name your building, and I would suggest naming it something that someone other than you recognizes, because if you're going to share the property or it gets transferred to someone else in the future, you want to make sure it's searchable and findable by the name that's common to as many people as possible in your organization. You put in the street address, municipality, the postal code. This all is helping to know where in the world your building is, because Portfolio Manager does also use weather normalized data to make sure that how your energy is used at your building is being thought about in the climate and the area of the weather for that year. So putting in all of your information, that's just some of the way that Portfolio Manager also is analyzing your energy use. The year built can be approximate. It's just trying to get the approximate age of the building. And then the gross floor area is the one that is probably the one that most people don't know right off the top of their head. This isn't the amount of leasable space or rentable space, but it's the total amount of space inside the walls that is conditioned space. So you want to figure out what is the total interior space that is using energy, including common areas, corridors, basements, not just the leasable square footage. And then it's going to ask you an occupancy question. Is this building over the past 12 months or past year? Is it 100% occupied, 90% occupied? Most people are going to pick 100%, but that's something that you could go back and change from year over year if your occupancy fluctuates drastically. And then at the bottom, it's going to ask you some other questions, just some common things to make sure that if the answer is yes to any of these, that it's going to ask you some more questions later on. So it's kind of like one of those, wizards of like, if you say this, then I'm going to ask you things in the future. So if your property's energy has parking areas that might have standalone lighting poles or lighting, or if it's a parking structure that has conditioned space, any of these check boxes are things that are going to ask you some more questions later. If you have a data center, other things like that. But if you don't need to check any of these if none of them apply. And then once you've put in those common pieces of the property, it's going to get into the questions about whatever you entered as your primary use type. So if you said your primary use type of the building was a multifamily property, then it's going to ask you some multifamily questions next. Every different primary use type is going to have a little bit different property questions. And that is because it's trying to get at how much energy is being used per square foot by the occupants in the building. And so for a multifamily building, it's going to ask more questions about the number of residential living units, how many bedrooms are in those units to get a sense of occupancy, because you may not know how many members of the family might be living in any particular unit. It's also trying to figure out if it's a low rise, a mid rise, or a high rise building. and just a little bit of different questions. And I'll talk about office and some other opportunities for other building types as well in a second. But Devin, do you have any thoughts to add here about kind of what happens with these questions on the primary use type?
No, I would say that Candy shared a link to the different definitions of use types that, again, I would say is really helpful, especially if you have a mixed use building, you're trying to figure out how to divide up those percentages, how to make sure that you have the right number of gross floor areas included in your entry. I would say relying on those pieces can be really helpful, and also feel free to reaching out to any of the resources that we'll mention later to help us parse out what's going to work best for you.
Exactly. And as we mentioned before, any of these blue links, if you're curious, what does it mean by number of residential living units in a low rise building, 1 to 4 stories? You can hover over that or click it and it'll explain it further in a definition, because if you've never done this before, that definition may seem kind of unique to portfolio manager versus what you think it means. So definitely check those out and make sure to ask questions if you have them. If you were doing an office building, it's a little bit different. It's not going to ask about number of bedrooms or high rise and low rise, but more about what are the weekly operating hours? How many workers are there at any particular on the main shift? How many are using computers? Those types of questions. And so it's a little bit more related to office life, getting a sense of how many people are using energy in a space during a given time of the day there. I would say one tip or trick on this one around weekly operating hours is to think it through beyond just the weekdays. So if your office is used on Saturdays or Sundays in a common way, or maybe by a different tenant, just really thinking about when is the building being conditioned, used, the lights are on, it's being cooled or heated on a regular basis. If it's not 9 to 5, maybe it's 7 to 8. But just thinking about what the weekly operating hours and having the kind of a general average for the whole year, even if there might be some different things that happen throughout. Similarly, with a worship facility, a lot of folks have, it has some similar questions to the office setting, but also worship facilities can be used in a lot of different ways. And so it also asks about if there's any cooking facilities on site, if there's any commercial refrigeration or freezer units, as a lot of times in worship facilities, there's kind of a community center piece of it where food might be prepared. If it doesn't have that, you just answer no or put 0 in those fields. But it does ask some additional questions that helps Energy Star get a better sense of how the energy is used in the building, get a better sense of your score and your energy use intensity. And again, they all have blue links, so you can click and learn a little bit more. And then I mentioned before, the parking questions always seem to trip people up just a little bit. And so if you entered that you have a parking facility on your site, just adding some different pieces of what it's going to ask you next around parking. It's going to ask you about the parking lot size in 3 different ways. And so if you have an open parking lot that has light poles that are all connected to your meters as well, that's when you'd want to add that here. And you might put that it's 5,000 square feet. If you don't have any partially enclosed garage space or any completely enclosed garage space, you just put 0 in those 2 fields. Because they're required, you have to put something there, but the answer can be 0. It doesn't need to be a particular number. I don't know, Devin, if you get any questions about parking on here very often, but I know I get a few here and there about, if the lighting is off the back of the building and just attached to the building itself, then maybe we don't count that. But if it's lighting poles or an enclosed parking garage, that's when there might be that additional energy use being used by the building. Does that come up for you at all?
Yes, definitely. I would say also one thing that I've seen is forgetting to include that gross floor area for the parking broken out when they enter in their information. It might be included in the general total gross floor area for the entire property. But if you're asked to again break out with that property with the sizes for the actual parking versus what's the use type space, it's good to have those differentiated so that again, everything at the end equals that total that you have entered already.
Yep, great one. And that gets to this point, which is the next slide of secondary use types. You might have a building that is 100% multifamily with a parking garage, like we just talked about, but you also might have a building that is, 80% or 75% residential with some retail or community center or a different use type. I know when we worked with buildings in Oak Park, where there was one that had a movie theater, but then with a dance studio and a coffee shop and all attached in one building. So this could also come up in, just different uses within the walls of the building that you're thinking about. So if there's different use types, you can also add secondary use types, but again, you want to make sure however many use types you add, that it adds up to that total gross floor area that you entered on the first screen, that primary use type of that primary use. There are things you don't have to break out. For example, a multifamily building, portfolio manager assumes a lot of things about a multifamily property, that they will likely have maybe a workout room or a small community room, or potentially a very small retail establishment, like under 1,000 square feet or 500 square feet. So it's really looking at things that are outside of the norm, like does it have a swimming pool? Like that's going to use a lot of energy and be different and maybe not the same across that property type. And if that's the case, then it's going to ask you some more questions about the pool. But really, a lot of the buildings that portfolio manager, the primary use types, they're taking into consideration that they have similar amenity spaces or similar, like a small office, maybe for a leasing agent, but that it's not something you would need to break out in a whole different square footage. So next, your portfolio manager, like your property is set up. You've answered all the questions. You've said, this is how my building uses energy and all the different ways. And now you actually have to put the energy that you use into portfolio manager. So there's an energy tab that we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about how you add utility meters, how you gather data from the utilities, and then how you enter it into portfolio manager next. So we spent time setting up the building, and that information and anything you want to edit regarding your building size and type and uses is going to be on that summary and details tab. But now we're going to go into the energy tab to set up some meters. And so these are the way that we're going to add energy to show how much energy is being used over the course of the year. So you click the add a meter button, and then you're going to move on to the next task. If you don't have any meters set up yet, it's going to ask you what are the sources of your energy use. And so you want to add a meter for every fuel type. In most cases, in our region, you'll have an electric and a gas meter. And if you are, in a lot of cases, you'll probably want to just set up one meter for both. If you are the owner of a building and you have access to all the meters in your building and all of the data, that might be a different scenario where you would enter multiple meters if you have access to all of the data. But I'm going to show you how to get whole building aggregated data from the utilities next if you have multiple tenants. So for the purposes of this exercise, we're going to show 1 meter for electric and gas, knowing that there are some nuances to that depending on your access to the data in your building. But really for Energy Star Portfolio Manager, we're trying to get all the energy used in the building. So all the bills, everything accounted for, not just maybe the common areas that you pay for. The common energy units when you're setting up your portfolio manager account and your energy tabs is the kilowatt hours for electricity, and then gas units is therms. And then one tip or trick is to make sure that the date the meter became active isn't necessarily the date where the building was built or the first date when the utility went into effect at your building, but it's the same date as when you're going to enter your first utility bill. Portfolio manager is going to always get mad if these dates don't match. And so just making sure, like, if you're going to start benchmarking your data as of January 1st, 2024, then make sure you set your meter start date as that same date. I know we're going to talk about tips and tricks probably about this a little bit more later, but Devin, do you have anything about that start date that you want to add right now?
No, I think you said it all, Katie, when it comes to entering information that maybe doesn't line up correctly or is overlapping. Ideally, Benchmark Portfolio Manager will flag that. But if it doesn't catch it in this phase, running the data quality checker, which we'll talk about later, will catch that and walk you through the steps about how to update that information if there's an overlap or a gap in use.
Awesome. Thank you. Once you set up those meters, it also is going to take you to a next page, which says, select all of the meters to be included in your energy metrics. And so in order for Portfolio Manager to know, like, these are the meters you want to use to talk about the total consumption, you have to check these check boxes and then do this one little radial button that says this is counting for the whole building. It's possible that you might set up some other meters that you don't want to use, or you want to track separately for your own use. For example, if you have a multifamily building and you have your bills in the common area only, and you want to look at, like, I want to see if things are going better because I did a lighting upgrade and I just want to look at the common area use. You could set up a separate meter, look at that by itself, but you'd want to keep it that separate from how it's, I don't know if I'm describing this correctly, but you want to set it up so that it's just for you to be able to look at and not how it's being tracked in the consumption for your whole building, because it'll be duplicating data. Once you do that, you'll go on to a next screen where it's going to ask you to start entering monthly energy data. And so there are 3 different ways that you could do that. You can do this button that's click to add an entry. And so you can add 12 months of data in this way because you need a whole year of data for Energy Star to calculate your usage. And so you can do that manually. They also have a spreadsheet that you can download and fill in and then upload again back into Portfolio Manager. Or you can do another piece that I'm going to show you in a minute, which is connecting Portfolio Manager to your ComEd account. But basically, you can. It's pretty simple. Once you get in here, you're just adding the start date, adding the end date. As Devin mentioned earlier, you don't want any overlapping dates. So making sure all of the dates in the year are accounted for, and that your start and end dates don't overlap from month to month. It gives you an opportunity to add cost or estimate other pieces here, but you don't need to add costs unless that's just for your own tracking purposes of understanding your bills. So I'm going to show you how to request data from NICOR, Peoples, or ComEd, because if you are a multi-tenant building, like a commercial office building or a multi-family building, chances are you don't have access to everybody's bills within the whole building. And the whole idea of Portfolio Manager is to understand the whole building energy use and how you can make improvements over time. So there's a way to get around that, which is requesting it from the utilities. Peoples Gas and North Shore Gas has a data request system. It has an information request form and a spreadsheet that you can fill out and then send back to be able to get aggregated data. So you'll need to know the meters in the building. So trying to find where your gas line is coming in, finding the meter numbers to make sure all of the meters are accounted for on this aggregated data request. There are some probably tips and tricks to this as well. But basically you are sending it to Peoples Gas, asking them for the aggregated monthly usage. And within a couple of weeks, you should get back an email with a PDF that will just have all of the energy use for January for your building, all of the energy use for February, all of the energy use for March. So you'll have 12 months of whatever year you were requesting. Devin, do you have any tips and tricks on this one as well?
Yeah, I would say that specifically when it comes to requesting data from Peoples Gas, I've come across some property managers that have an issue getting the full 12 months. In some cases, they make the request through this process and maybe only get 10 out of the 12 months. And I would say it's about you're putting in a good faith effort to try to get that whole building energy data. Peoples Gas is required to provide that to you under the ordinance in Chicago and Other municipalities have their own kind of system set up to encourage utilities to provide that information to you. But if you go through this process and you're just not getting every single month, Portfolio Manager does have default values. It can assign to your meters based off of that use type, the region where your property is located in, the size, all those kind of like identifying factors that we talked about in the beginning. So if for some reason you can't get every single month in the calendar year, you can use those default values and that'll be within compliance. It's mostly about trying to do your best to get all this information, but we know that sometimes working directly with utilities, there can be challenges in getting all that information together.
Absolutely. The same goes for NICOR. They have a separate spreadsheet. Again, we're going to send you this PDF later. So if this is something you're looking for, you can click the links here and find these tools. And if you are trying to comply with a specific municipality's ordinance, this detailed information will be on those pages as well about how to aggregate the data. But basically, you're filling out the spreadsheet to the best of your ability. And in your email, as we mentioned, you're requesting whole building energy use, aggregated data. You want it monthly throughout the whole year. Some of the things that might need to process the request with NICOR, similar to Peoples Gas, is the number of units in the building, like what the units are called, the meter list, any master meter. These can be found where the gas line meets the building, as I mentioned. So you might have to like dust it off and look a little bit closely and find those meter numbers, but that really helps them get an accurate list to you of what will be included in that aggregated data they send. The next thing I'm going to talk about is how you request from ComEd. ComEd has a little bit of a different process, so apologies in advance. I have several slides on this piece because it's a little bit more complicated, but then it's also can be a little bit automated once you get there. And so ComEd, for their system, they have an enrollment form on their energy usage data system website. So it's different than logging into your ComEd account. This is creating a new enrollment form to collect and ask for whole building energy data. So all of the accounts within your building. What happens here is you fill out this form, you email it back to ComEd at the energy usage data at ComEd, and then within about 24 hours, you'll get an email back that has a login to your account. Definitely click it as soon as you get it back, because within 5 or 7 days, if you haven't clicked it to verify your account, you have to start over and submit a new enrollment form, which I don't think you want to do. And so just click it as soon as you can and just verify that account, get your password set up, and then you're able to log in. Once you're logged in to their energy usage data system, you can do a number of things. One is if your building has multiple addresses, you can add secondary addresses to make sure you're accounting for all of the units and tenants in the building. So for example, if you're on a corner or along a long row of building addresses, you can add those secondary addresses and make sure that that's correct. If you own multiple buildings, you can also go in and add additional buildings now that you have your account set up as well, and get usage requests for those as well. Once you've put in all of your secondary addresses, if you have any, you can go to this Verify Tenants tab within the tool, and it'll show you kind of all of the units there to make sure that every unit associated with your building is accounted for. It's also going to show you the tenant names or past tenant names. That doesn't matter as much as just making sure all the units are there. And then you're able to verify that all those units are correct and associated with your building. You can reject anything that isn't. So like if it accidentally pulled in a Starbucks next door and you don't want to include that in your data, you can reject that as well. Once you have verified your tenants, you are able to submit a usage request. And so you can submit a usage request on the usage request tab. You can do it for a 12-month period, or if you're going to connect it straight to your portfolio manager account, which I'll talk about in a second, you can request it in an indefinite period with just a start date. You can, once you submit that usage request, you can download the data as a file, or you can, connect that straight into your portfolio manager account. But it's pretty great. It's all here in the tool, but this does require you to have kind of another username and password separate from your portfolio manager username and password, and kind of manage those two pieces. But it's a nice way to continue to collect data for your building year after year without making an additional request over email. And one of the super cool things it does is you can also connect it straight into your portfolio manager account if you want to. This is certainly not required, but if you wanted to, there's a whole usage guide about how to do this. You can connect your Energy Star meter that you set up, like when we selected setting up a gas and electric meter. You can set portfolio manager, or I'm sorry, energy ComEd's energy usage data system to just fully populate as each month's bills come through. It'll just put it straight into portfolio manager for you. That can be a little bit tedious to set up, but once you have, you can kind of set it and forget it, and it'll keep putting that in there forever. There's some really great, very screenshot heavy, useful guides that'll guide you through that process to both set up your EUDS account and also a separate guide if you want to figure out how to connect it to your Energy Star portfolio manager account. And again, we'll put these links in the chat or in the follow-up email to the webinar today if you're interested in checking that out. So once you have all of that data, you've got it in your account, you might want to check your work and see what's going on. So I'm going to turn it to Devin next to talk a little bit about how to check for any common issues that came through. And then if we have time, I'm going to show you a couple of other cool things that Portfolio Manager can do as well. Here you go, Devin.
So just some quick tips and tricks, in addition to the ones that we've mentioned throughout this presentation, things to keep in mind as you're getting your portfolio set out, as you're entering your information, as you're getting ready to report, is to kind of know who your team is. If you're working with multiple people, to get that information together, if one person's responsible for getting that whole building energy data, one person's responsible for making sure the compliance requirements are met, just know who those folks are so that you can coordinate accordingly and make sure you're not only hitting that deadline submission, but also making sure, again, you're not forgetting any of those compliance requirements that may be part of the reporting ordinance. This is also helpful to keep in mind for contact information. When Katie was showing that portfolio creation in the beginning, if you create your portfolio and you are the primary administrator for a certain property, you're kind of like the main admin for the single property or the multiple properties that you're maybe managing and sharing with other users. Oftentimes that contact associated with that property data administrator role is the one that receives notice reminders or submission completion reminders from municipalities that you're working with. So if you're new to managing a property, double checking that that information is correct is going to be helpful to make sure that, hey, I submitted the report, I didn't get any email about it. Why is that? Just making sure that contact information is updated will help save some of that confusion, especially if you want to make sure you're receiving those notices. Additionally, kind of knowing who's working on your current team is going to be helpful to avoid duplication with submission. Again, if you're new to managing a property and you knew that someone else in your company managed it previously, or that the property or that the firm managing the property worked with an outside contractor to submit a report, understand kind of who's responsible now for submitting it. If the municipality receives multiple submissions with different values or different names associated, that can lead to some confusion in terms of what values are most accurate, what compliances are being met, that sort of thing. So get to know kind of who's managing the property now, who was managing it before, do they know that they're no longer responsible for submitting a report, that sort of thing. And you can always contact Portfolio Manager to make sure that if you don't have access to the property's account, to see if you can get that switched over, or to just see who that previous administrator was, so you know whether you can transfer ownership to you or if you need to start a new account. I would also say that familiarizing yourself with resources like workshops like this, with resources we've included in the chat, is really helpful. Typically, different municipalities will create their own guidelines, checklists, walkthrough presentations, that sort of thing. So get to know what's available through your city to make sure you're following along with their most recent helpful guides. And also, if you do run into an issue, knowing what can be communicated to the hub, what can be communicated to your municipality versus what's kind of in the realm of portfolio manager is helpful when it comes to things like account accessing or having any issues when you're entering that billing information, things like that. That'll be something that you can communicate with portfolio manager, submit a ticket through their help desk. When it comes to kind of the general tips and tricks, things like this, feel free to direct it towards us at the hub, as well as to the municipality that you're working with. And then finally, confirming the submission process. Are you required to submit directly through portfolio manager? Is there an external link that your municipality is using? Just so you know that you're hitting that deadline and that also if it's done correctly. In some cases, the property manager might like email the city directly the spreadsheet of their utility information. Oftentimes that doesn't necessarily mean that that information is getting uploaded into their system. So just know what process you need to follow in order to get that information submitted correctly. Go on to the next slide. Another tip is to use the portfolio manager data quality checker. Mentioned earlier that as you're going through and entering the building information, sometimes you'll see like a little red exclamation mark. That is portfolio manager doing its own like internal quality checking. If you hover over that red exclamation mark, it'll tell you what error it's finding throughout the process as you're entering the information. After you've entered information and you're getting ready to submit, you could also run this data quality checker. It's on that main My Portfolio tab at the very bottom. You'll see run for possible errors. If you run that, you can specifically select the calendar year of data that you're looking at, and then it'll review the data that you entered for things like gaps in the meters, overlapping bills, if it seems like the gross flow area has been miscalculated. Certain flags will pop up too for like temporary values if you've entered those in as you're waiting to get your full billing information. Other alerts will come up for like no waste and water data. Those are usually just to remind you if you wanted to enter that information in, but most municipalities are specifically looking at energy benchmarking and don't require waste or water. So just make sure you know what's required of you, but that will be flagged. But everything that's flagged doesn't necessarily mean it's an error that you must correct in order to meet compliance with your municipality. Next slide. And some other common problems that can be helpful to address before submission that we've seen often is inaccurate, kind of like that basic property information. So this is specifically relevant if you are taking over a property that's been benchmarked before, making sure that you're not just carrying over those values in case the size of the property has changed, if there's been a change in like primary address for the notices, if the overall use type has changed, like if there's a new primary use type based off of recent construction, if the occupancy has changed, as well as making sure that general age of the property is correct from the beginning. Sometimes it's easy to have those things carried over, but if they were incorrectly added in the first place, you want to make sure that that's being updated accordingly so that all your calculations are correct, all the information that goes into calculating the Energy Star rating is correct. So just double check all of that prior to submission. Specifically relevant to properties within the Chicago area that are benchmarking under the ordinance, making sure that you have your energy benchmarking ID from the city when you're submitting your report. It's required when you submit, and it's helpful for the city to track the reports from year to year. That's available on the covered building list the city provides, as well as by emailing them directly. And if you don't think you have one, you could email the city as well, and they'll generate one for you. Making sure that the data verifier information that's required every 3 years is in the correct field, so you don't get flagged as being out of compliance for that specific requirement is helpful. And then finally, when it comes to the Chicago Energy Rating Placard, certain things are required to calculate that value and to receive it. So again, it's making sure that contact information is correct, that the use types are correct, and that you're submitting the property accordingly. And if you have any specific questions related to the Chicago specific ordinance, feel free to drop it in the chat, or again, you can contact us afterward as well. Next.
Awesome. Thanks, Devin. I'm gonna go through these things really quickly so we can have time for questions because I see a few in the chat. But I just wanted to share that Portfolio Manager does some other cool things that we've mentioned in passing over the course of the session. But one of the things is like you can make friends in Portfolio Manager by sending them a friend request, kind of like other social media, but this is more for tracking energy. And so you can add a contact, so you can look people up by their username or by their name or their organization. And then you can kind of friend them. They have to accept the request. And then you can actually share your building portfolio account with other people, either as read-only access or full access if you're trying to work on it together. It's also the way in ordinances like Evanston and Oak Park that you're able to share with the municipality themselves and submit your data that way, which is a little bit different submission process than the City of Chicago's ordinance process. It's also how you can connect to ComEd. And so one of the ways that you can connect your Energy Star Portfolio Manager account to your ComEd energy usage data account is by friending ComEd energy usage data system in this piece of the tool, and then sharing your building and doing a data exchange that way. So this is a great place to look and make sure that you know how to add a contact if you're trying to do any of those pieces. There's a notifications tab at the top of Portfolio Manager that shows you whether you have any incoming or outgoing requests in that regard to accept your friend requests there. And then the sharing tab, which we touched on briefly at the beginning, which is next to the My Portfolio tab, is where you do that sharing. So once you have that contact and connection, they've accepted your request, that's when you can do this sharing of properties. You can select which properties you want to share. You don't have to share all of them. But again, this is once you have those contacts, you can all do that sharing as well and work on things together. I'll just talk through this really briefly, but basically this is the screenshot of that page and how you select that sharing. You can look at this a little further if you want to get into it on your own, and then wanted to share some helpful Energy Star resources. So we've talked about a lot of things today, but you probably weren't following along and doing it while we were talking. So just wanted to share some of these things we mentioned, the data collection worksheets, where you can download from every primary use type that we talked about to make sure you have all the data that you want about your building in advance before you sit down and start filling out your account. That glossary terms link. There's a lot of training tools that Energy Star provides. And then also Energy Star has tools for your home. So you might be doing this for your day job at work about the building that you're working with, but also you probably live somewhere too, and maybe you want to check out some of those Energy Star resources for your home. So I included this for your personal use as well. And I'm going to pause there so that we can see if any questions have come into the chat that we can answer. So I'm going to bring on Kindy Kruller, who also works at the Building Energy Resource Hub, to let us know if there are any questions in the chat.
There's a couple comments and questions in the chat. We are trying to answer them as they've gotten in. Looks like David Eldridge have added a couple different clarifications. I don't know, David, if you want to add anything else verbally, you can come off mute. And I don't see any other questions. We did receive one in the question and answer that was asking about if the recording would be available. And yes, we will both send out the link after today's webinar, and then it will also live on our education tab for the Building Energy Hub website.
Great. And yeah. I know David Eldridge knows a lot more than me about Portfolio Managers, so whatever he wrote in the chat is probably accurate. Thanks, David.
Yes.
And thanks for listening, even though I'm sure you could give this yourself.
So one of the questions, there's one more question I wanted to, should occupancy be the percentage of an academic building when it is occupied and school is in session? So is there a way to divide occupants by the number of hours that they spend in the buildings?
Oh, on the main occupancy section?
Yes.
That's a great question. I'm going to see what David writes in the chat, but I think the answer there is like on the main time of the year. So in the most used time, that it's 100% occupied. You're going to have that weekly operating hours. That's going to be a question that's asked later. But yeah, there's definitely going to be seasonal times for like schools and churches or other uses like that. But I don't think it's something that you would change based on.
That's what David just wrote. He agrees that use as the regular occupancy. So you don't have to split your time between seasons or who knew this was going to turn into a quick quiz show?
No, I like a quiz show. Great.
Um, other questions? I did put in the help desk for the Building Energy Hub, so please, if you just go in and bookmark it or add it to wherever you keep your tabs for the websites that you keep. This will be really helpful if you have to benchmark your building or you're going through Portfolio Manager and can't remember all of the different tips and tricks you heard today, or the help desk is standing by.
Awesome. Well, I'm just going to share a couple of last slides with folks so that if you have done your Energy Star Portfolio Manager work and you've gotten your score or gotten your results of how your building is performing, sometimes you might be super happy and excited and it's performing better than you thought, or exactly how you thought it should be. And sometimes you might be a little bit disappointed or like, oh, I didn't realize that, it wasn't performing as, other similar buildings of my same type and size. And so I just wanted to share just some resources, and you'll have links to these in the follow-up as well. But all of the utilities offer free energy assessments for building types and sizes. And so just wanted to share this is a great place to start next if you are, and sorry, there's a lot of words on this slide, but if you are looking to get started and try and figure out where there's opportunities for savings, ComEd has commercial and small business facility assessments. And it has, based on your peak load, you can call and talk to them and figure out, either way, they'll know what, based on your square footage of your building, which of these assessments you're eligible for. People's Gas has a similar one for small and mid-sized business. Where they'll come out and walk through and find opportunities and also show you what rebates and incentives you're eligible for that you might want to take advantage of. NICOR also has a similar, it's called Energy Advisor, or an engineer will conduct a free assessment. You'll get a customized report that's similar to both ComEd and People's Gas. So these are great tools to come and check out and do as a first kind of free step to figure out where some opportunities are for savings and then what incentives and rebates are eligible. Some of the common assessment recommendations around energy and gas are here on the screen. A lot of them are really low and no cost things that you could tweak and fix yourself or be able to do within a year payback period with a rebate or incentive. So just wanted to share this as kind of a next step after you've benchmarked, as a way to kind of get going on your journey around energy efficiency. I've included links to those 3 different tools so that you can take advantage of those as well. And just back to the hub, if you have any other questions, we have a lot of great resources around getting started on our website as well. And again, as Kindy mentioned, the help desk, we have a discussion forum there as well, where you can ask some complicated questions, and hopefully David wants to join that and provide you some answers. But we really thank you for being here today. Thank you, Devin, for joining me and doing this tips and tricks webinar. And we hope you all have a great time getting started with benchmarking, and let us know if you need help along your journey. Thanks and have a great afternoon.